Right. I'm going to do a little check-in with you. So on your screens, if you're used to using Zoom before, there is a chat function. So in the chat function, you can write a chat or write something that is to everybody, or you can just chat back to me. And that's what I'd like you to do. So this is a private chat. It's a private check-in. So you just want, I'm just going to ask you a question. I want you to respond back to me. So it'll be Kinch Lines or host will be in brackets. And that's what I'd like you to do. So this is just a quick check-in. I'm just really asking you, so how are you feeling today? What's going on for you? And also maybe like, how is your energy level right now? So yeah, I'd like you to do that. Just to come back to me, if you would, please. Okay, some interesting comments coming in. Great, thank you. Okay, some good emotional expression in some of what I'm seeing there today. Okay, great mix of emotions with some people as well, which is great to see that blend of different emotions that you might be experiencing. Very good. Okay, so that gives me a good sense. Okay, great. More things coming in. Okay, very good. Okay, thank you for that. That's very useful for me in terms of just looking at, you know, where you are today before we start into the session proper. So it gives me a good sense of you, and I will say there's quite a range of emotions and quite a range of emotions quoted back to me there. So I bear that in mind and match that as we go. So first thing I want to do is a warm up. So please don't be frightened by the fact that there is now an athlete image on your screen. I'm not going to ask you to do a run around or anything like that. But just think about it. What do athletes do when they're about to compete? They warm up the muscles that they're going to use. So for example, you know, if you're a marathon runner and you're doing a warm up, you won't be lifting dumbbells or something like that. You'll be exercising the muscles that you're going to use. And that's what I want to do with you is exercise some of those psychological muscles that we're going to use over the next period of time this morning. So it's a very simple exercise, very simple to do, and it's private. So it's not going to be something embarrassing or something that you have to share. This is just for you to do, okay? So I want you to look around, and maybe if there's a window, maybe you've got a window that you can look out, but just look around you, the room you're in. You're probably all in very familiar surroundings. They're quite familiar, probably some of you, and becoming more familiar all the time because you're spending probably a lot more time there. But despite the fact that they're familiar, I'd like you to notice something that you haven't noticed before. So look around, try and spot something that you haven't noticed, whether it's outside the window, on your computer, on your desk, on the wall, on the ceiling, whatever it is. Just to do that, notice something and write it down. You don't have to put it in the chat box, so just keep a note of it yourself. What is it that you've actually noticed? Just take a few seconds to do that if you would, please. Okay. Why did I ask you to do that? Well, why I asked you to do that was to start you exercising that muscle of curiosity. To start looking for things that you may not have noticed before, because some of what we'll be talking about today will be things that, yes, well, you say, well, I have been there before, these are familiar to me, but I want you to come into this session with fresh eyes and start looking for things that you may not, be really curious. So you've already exercised that muscle a little bit, even though it's a very short exercise, you've exercised and warmed up that psychological muscle, which will help you during the rest of the session. So let's move on. What is a virtual team? This is one definition, and there's lots of them. I mean, typically they talk about groups that are organized geographically or across time, but really what I want to focus on is that last few words there about technologies. That a virtual team does rely on technology in order to work together. So there's a reliance on communication. And that now, where can we connect that in with emotional intelligence? So that's what we're going to be looking at later. But this is what a virtual team is. And what I want to emphasize is one thing here. When you're thinking about virtual teams, at the extreme end, there is a completely distributed team. So that's sometimes what we think of a virtual team. You've got some people in maybe in India, some people in Europe, some people in the United States, quite dispersed. But think of a virtual team in the broader sense of the definition. It can be literally a team that's only virtual some of the time. So, for example, a sales team that is, maybe in the office for part of the week, but then dispersed for the rest of the week. They still need telecommunications technology, and goes into the definition. Or it could be as simple as there are one or two people on the team who maybe work from home a day a week. So when you're thinking about virtual teams, anything other than people who are constantly working together in physical proximity, take that as a virtual team. So if that is the definition, I would like you to, if I can, to go, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms for a period of time. So I'm looking at the number of people we have here. So, okay, I'll break you into maybe about 8 rooms. It'll take me a moment just to do this. Get my breakout rooms here. Sorry, for some reason, I'm not able to do that just now. Please bear with me. I'm really sorry about this. I can't seem to get you into the breakout room. I'm just wondering, would one of my colleagues be able to help here a little? I'm really sorry about this. My breakout room is not working. Okay, I'm going to. Okay, let's abandon the breakout room for the moment. And instead of that, let's just share openly. And I'll ask you to share and come into the conversation here. And you can just unmute yourself on just this question from your own personal experience or for some of your clients. What are some of the challenges that you've encountered when leading, managing, or coaching a virtual team? What are some of the things that you've come across? And feel free, whoever you'd like to jump in. I see you all on screen there. So what are some of the challenges that you have faced or some of your clients have faced with leading, managing, or coaching a virtual team?
I'll jump in there if you want, Billy.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah. So hi and good morning to everybody. My name is Tom, and I'm lucky enough to own and run a live coaching where we've got 16 associates. And so rather than talking about the challenges, I'm just going to talk about the opportunities that we've experienced through COVID. So heretofore we meet quarterly in the IMI in a fancy room, have a big lunch, go for a couple of pints afterwards and so on and so forth. And since COVID, what we're doing is we're meeting on a weekly basis. Okay. So I've just come off our third or fourth Zoom call. I don't know which number it is now. And we have it every Wednesday at 10 a.m. And it is just fantastic. Those of us that are able to make it. No one really chairing it, even though I organised the meeting. And we'll just share. So this morning we just talked about work, what was happening for us, something that we're actually proud of, and something that's happening and challenging for us on a personal basis. So from where I'm coming from, virtual teams and bringing them together, we're together more often now than we ever were, albeit in a virtual space. And from that, they're breaking out with one another. So it's just really great. Thanks, Billy.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to jump in? Maybe some of the opportunities, as Tom said, or some of the challenges of virtual teams?
Can I just jump in there? It's Sarah Daly.
Yeah.
I will agree with Tom. I have more interaction with my team than I've ever had before. And there's a lot more leeway for my clients, which I'm managing at the moment. Some of them are finding it very isolating. They finding challenging to use technology. But at the same time, I send an email every Monday to all my clients basically saying, here's a Zoom or we can have a phone call. It doesn't have to be about work. It can be about whatever else. And we just have a 15-minute chat to catch up.
Yeah.
And I'm noticing I'm having more interaction with my clients now than ever. And it doesn't have to be about work, but I'm able to help them with whatever skill sets I have. And if I don't have it, my colleagues have it. Right. So yeah, I know I know one client is very lonely, but now that I make sure that we talk at least once a week, it makes such a difference.
Okay. And I see Jill has come in there as well. There's in the comments box, that's on the chat, like a preference for introversion and extroversion. I don't know, Jill, if you'd like to jump in on that, or someone else want to in that, how this works for introverts versus people who have a preference for extroversion.
It was just in terms of Biddy, just speaking with, you know, having group chats or communications with members of the team, and I suppose you reach out and typically you can see a lot of the preferences playing out. I mean, I know my own preferences for extroversion,
Yeah.
and I mean, obviously I come across a lot of my stakeholders and team members and so on preferences for introversion, and I suppose at an online sort of in a virtual setting, I find that challenging because, you know, in a one-to-one, like if you're face-to-face, you can sort of probe, or you can just say, look, could you get a little, you know, bit more on that? But it's much more challenging, I suppose, when you're working remotely. And it's you know, introversion, the introversion piece is I suppose exemplified because you're not seeing any reaction a lot of the time, as well as you're not hearing or getting a piece of feedback.
Yeah, that's really good. And that's something we're going to come to as well, around some of the limitations there. But I think from the most intelligent point of view, before we even jump in there, is that awareness of different personality types and how working virtually will be experienced differently by, you know, people who have more preference for introversion than extroversion, and how we might help those people as well. They'll have different challenges and how we would do that. So that's there. Just looking at a few more comments there as well. Need to better articulate how decisions are made now they're working virtually, and decision rights that different people have. Okay, and that can lead into two things there. I think there's, and we'll get a moment in managing conflict and decision making. So does anyone, final one, want to jump in with a comment on this particular question?
Really, I'll jump in there if I can.
Yeah, Tanya, thanks.
A couple of things I've been seeing from clients and just friends and family as well, I suppose, is finding that balance of communication.
Okay.
And so there's avoiding people feeling isolated in the team feeling connected. But I've also heard of a lot of people who have so many Zoom calls scheduled, they're actually finding it difficult to get the work done. There's possibly an over communication, you know, people feeling the need. And I think maybe that's just a question of time, of figuring out the new ways of working, and maybe in some cases building trust in the team members on that as well.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Tanya. That's a really great insight as well as to what people are experiencing now, and the amount and the level of virtual communication that they're faced with. And this is quite an unusual you know, situation we're in currently, where so many of us are working virtually, and probably more than we would even normally. So I just want to share with you, just to jump in a little bit, and in terms of some of the research to say what are the challenges for virtual teams. And this is just, and I've even picked up some of these, even at the comments and discussing I've had, is managing conflict is always comes up at one of the top. These aren't in ranked order, but managing conflict can be difficult in a virtual team setting. Building trust when you don't have that face-to-face, that warm body interaction. Developing team spirit, and I would say even team ethos can be difficult, and that team culture, because it's a very dispersed team. Meetings, decision-making, which someone mentioned there already as well, and managing performance at a distance. And interesting one that I've come across myself is leveraging diversity, where, you know, you might look at a team and say, you know, this is a very diverse team. They've got, you know, a number of people who are working in maybe in India, maybe if you're on the IT developers or whatever. They've got people in Europe, got people in the United States, but actually it's not being leveraged because you end up with just 3 silos. And that really takes effort as well. So those are some of the challenges. So I want to look now at a particular lens that we will use from emotional intelligence. Now, some of you are familiar with EQI2, EQ360, ECR, all of these. I want to use the Mesquite. I've done a lot of thinking about this recently, my own experience in the last few weeks. I think the Mesquite, which is the Meyer-Salovey-Caruso emotional intelligence test, it's a really good lens to examine challenges, emotional intelligence and virtual teams. And I'll explain why. There's only 4 key abilities there. And if you're not familiar with it, this is just one slide. This is not going to go through it all. Firstly, how we perceive emotions. In other words, how do we actually, take in emotional information, self-awareness, empathy, our impact of emotions on others. Secondly, how do we use emotions? How do we use the emotions we're experiencing to help us in what we're trying to do? So that's a pair. Think of those as a pair, 1 and 2 together, okay? The second pair, 3 and 4, how we understand. This is where we think about emotions. And we're actually thinking, and this is a cognitive piece of emotional intelligence. And also things like, how do emotions, how do they move from one emotion to the next? There's a sequence the way emotions develop logically that we can follow. And also how emotions are integrated. Even in your initial comments to me, a number of you said, I'm feeling this, but I'm also feeling that. Here's a blend of emotions. I'm feeling, frustrated, but I'm also feeling somewhat excited, or I'm feeling, exhausted. However, I also feel somewhat, calm. So there's different things going on. And then finally, number 4, integrating emotions to help us make decisions. So that's just the model. So I said the 2 pairs. So think about perceive and use, and manage and understand, okay? And this is why I think this is a really good model, because it breaks emotional intelligence into experiential and strategic. So the first 2 skills are around experiential, and how we actually experience emotions. And the second 2 about how we think about emotions. And in my own experience of working with emotional intelligence and the Mesquite and with virtual teams, I believe there's a bit of a shift towards needing more of the strategic emotional intelligence when you're working with virtual teams. And I'll explain why that is. So if we look at when we say experiential, what are we talking about? I love the phrase Martha Nussbaum uses. She says, emotions are data, they are news from the world. I think that's a great way of explaining what emotions are. It is news, it's data, it's information that we have coming to us. And the thing to remember here is that in a virtual setting, we have less of that news coming to us. We don't have that warm body interaction. So, and we look at this in a moment, why that might be. And also, we need to be conscious that we need to provide more emotional data to other people. So the data flow is now filtered because we're using communications. So just if you take that, that's experiential. Just have a look then. Let's drill down a little bit into this as to why do we have less data? Well, think about communicating emotions. What do we need? There are the words. What are the words we say? But also we rely on body language. If you're having a warm body interaction, we are reading the body language and even micro gestures that we see, subtle movements with the person's expression, and also the tone of voice. They will all give us information when we're communicating emotions. So if you take, we say virtual team, it's not just using VC. Virtual teams will rely a lot more on messaging, texting, and obviously on email as well. So if they think like messaging, that's why we need emojis. We try to put in that little bit of extra, like, what is it? How should you interpret the emotion in this? So that's communication, but even in VC settings, we miss some of the body language. Like if you even look at your screen or look at the people that are attending here today, like we only get to see part of what's going on. And it can be actually really, really difficult to read a room. So if you come into a physical meeting with a group of people, we can read the room, and some people actually would be very skilled at that, in actually reading the room. That's experiential, very good at it, but really more difficult when you're in a virtual setting to actually read the room. So in those communications, there's things we need to think about. How can we increase the amount of data, that emotional data we can gather, and the amount of data that we can then also give to other people? So here's a challenge. We have less informal contact. We don't have the ongoing contact with our teams, for example. So how do we get more emotional data? So one thing we can do, we can check in more at the start of meetings, especially those one-to-ones, really checking in ourselves. How is this person today? We tend to do that informally anyway, but we need to think about it when we're in a virtual setting instead of just launching in. And at the start of meetings, where you have groups together, I think from an emotional intelligence point of view, we need to pay particular attention, really work hard at picking up the verbal and non-verbal signals. Put a little piece there, never jump in at the deep end. Like, don't dive in with a big issue early on in the meeting if you can at all. You need to get a sense and give yourself time. What's going on here? Where are people? You know, and get a sense of reading the room, which takes longer in a virtual setting. And we need to also be conscious of the fact we need to express our feelings as well as our thoughts. We need to let people know how we feel about things. You know, are we motivated by this? Are we frustrated by it? Are we threatened by it? So what's going on for us? And one really big thing we can do in that is to increase and broaden our emotional vocabulary. And this is a great thing to do for you to do personally. It's a great thing for leaders to do as well, in terms of increasing your emotional vocabulary, because you get two benefits for the price of one. One is by the fact that you start reflecting on your emotions, you build more self-awareness, and also you build the vocabulary at the same time. So even look at what I have here. This is again going from the Mesquite, where we look at our energy. Are we, you know, from a low to high? Where would we say we are? You know, low energy, high energy, or our feelings, are they pleasant or unpleasant? If we look at some of the words that we might use, you know, are we restful, like serene, fulfilled? Are we drained, despairing, lonely? Up in the yellow zone, that kind of creative piece, are we enthusiastic, exhilarated, pleasant, upbeat, what's there? And in the red zone, high energy, but unpleasant, angry or uneasy. So if you look at that, that's a way of increasing our emotional vocabulary, and we should really put effort into doing that ourselves and then with our clients, and then also putting it into practice. Having that rich vocabulary will enrich the data, the emotional data that we are giving to others. If we look at the strategic side of things, remember we said we also have the strategic element. And this is why I think strategic is critical in virtual teams, thinking about emotions, because we have to expand our emotional what if thinking. We need to start thinking in advance. How are things going to play out, for example, at meetings, in one-to-ones, whatever, because we don't have the in the moment opportunities quite as much as we would have in a normal team. So just take what I've called episodic communication. So communication is a bit stop-start. In virtual settings. It isn't we're all sitting in a pod or we're in a particular open plan office. So communication switches on. You know, we're into communication, we set up a call, or obviously the extreme episodic communication is when we talk about email. That's completely, here we're sending an email and it's a bigger episode. It can be difficult. This is something that came up from a client of mine recently that said, like, one of the most difficult challenges they face is choosing the right moment with their manager. So there's certain times I look at, this is a hot topic I need to talk to my manager about, but you know, I really need to pick my time. Much more difficult. We're not picking up the emotional data that we may need for that. So thinking strategically about that for emotional intelligence is really important. And I say that strategic, what I call strategic empathy, thinking in advance of your meetings, asking your questions like, what would be the reaction to this? You know, how will, you know, Mark or how will Mary take this? How should I phrase this? How should I introduce this? What is the likely reaction to be? And thinking about those things in advance. Even more so, I say you should do this all the time, but I think with virtual settings, it's even more important to do that. Another one that comes up, and this is something I've had both first-hand experience of in other settings, but also that's come up again and again with some of my clients, is transparency. And this is where your emotional intelligence thinking and emotional strategic empathy really plays a role. They say that nature abhors a vacuum. So there's a vacuum, nature will rush in to fill it. We as humans do the same. Daniel Kahneman said that we are creatures that are built to jump to conclusions. In other words, like, if there's not enough information, we'll make up information ourselves and we will jump in and fill it. And that can cause things like conflict in teams and lack of trust. So a few things I think that we need to do, and exercising emotional intelligence strategic skills here. Be attuned to picking up tensions caused by a lack of transparency. So I'll give you an example. I was working with a senior leader who had a global team, again, in various parts of the world. So it was a 24/7 operation effectively. You know, they had the full day covered by parts of the world. A few challenges here. One is that some of the team actually sat in the room with the leader. So the leader had a local team as well. And also teams which are quite remote. at the far side of the world. And one of the tensions that was picked up was that like each part of the team felt that they were doing more than their fair share of the work and others weren't. And this tension was simmering for a long time, and eventually only came up to light actually in a one-to-one warm body interaction that this leader had with a couple of the individuals, and surfaced it. I'll tell you what the solution was later. But that was a typical tension where people are not, transparency isn't there. We don't really know what's happening with everybody else, so we make up our own minds as to what we think is happening, and can cause conflict. Secondly, I said, ensure our own actions are transparent. So when we're doing things, it's really important for us to put extra effort into explaining the why, to really bring people into our confidence. Even if we have to repeat that with different teams because they're dispersed, we really need to put more effort into that so that people, I say, aren't jumping in with their own explanations. And a good question to ask anytime we're doing something as a virtual leader is like, who is affected by this? And not who isn't interested in it or who has an input to it, but who's going to be affected? Who may be affected by this decision I'm making that really I should communicate with them about it? And the fourth thing then is to put process in place. Processes will always save you. So the example I gave you with that particular leader I was working with, what they did was put a very simple dashboard in place. A very simple, and it wasn't a big brother dashboard with everyone watching everyone else, but allowed everybody to share what they were doing more transparently and more openly, and allowed them to do that. And I mean, the conflict level is just completely dissipated. And that was an important one for that team, and put the team in a better place. So again, if there are processes that can be put in place to increase transparency, again, put your emotional strategic thinking in place and do that. One final one that I'd put in here also is respecting boundaries. So when we are working with virtual teams, working hours can extend. I don't know if some of you are finding that already. I've picked it up from a number of my clients where they said, with the lack of structure, they have found their own days expanding considerably at each end of the day, because there isn't a finish, so they're doing that. And if we're working across different time zones, we really need, again, that empathy, thinking about like, where is the other person at this time? I could be having start of my day, this other person may be at the end of a very, very tough day. So again, that check-in, a mix of the experiential, emotional intelligence, but also bringing in the strategic and thinking ahead on that. I had just share an anecdote that I recently a person was talking about how they got a meeting invite for something like 6 o'clock on a Sunday evening. And the reason from the manager is saying that, well, look, we're all going to be tied up anyway, so what else would we be doing? Let's have a meeting. So again, respecting boundaries is something that we need to do, and recognizing again where other people are coming from. So just to give you, just to take a very practical example here. So I was going to have this session with you today. And by the way, we're going to do another open session after this in a moment, just looking at sharing some ideas. So I was thinking ahead, okay, what would be the what if thinking that I could do ahead of this session? So what did I need to think about? So I just thought of two things, right? So first thing to consider, what if some of the people are struggling with the impact of this situation? So we have 43 people here today. Some of you could be struggling financially. You may have relatives that are unwell. You may yourself have be self-isolating. So I've no way of knowing what's going on in your world. So you just think about that. A lot has changed even in the last week. Like we had our first session this day last week. And in the meantime, we've gone from certain restrictions to much more heavier restrictions on our movements. And obviously, as time goes on, we're all getting to the stage now where we probably know someone who is ill or worse from this virus. So there's a few things. So thinking about that, so what were some of the considerations? So this is just, again, sharing my own practicals. So the first thing is, I said, look, I'm going to check in at the beginning just to see where people are at, which is what I did at the start. Just to see how is everyone doing here, and just have a sense of, what kind of tone would be appropriate for today in doing that. Secondly, I said, okay, let's be a bit careful with the level of humor. This is just a warning for myself. I love humor. I think we need it probably now as much as more than we ever did. But again, humor is contextual as well. We need just in the concept of where we currently are having the lockdown more or less since last Friday, just being aware of that. So just be careful with the level of humor there. Third thing I said I would do, any examples I give, take them from a variety of angles, just to sanity check them. Did these sound like they would fit okay for today, considering where people might be at? And then finally, I said, okay, I'd like to let's finish with a positive message at the end, which I will do as well. So that's an example of, I suppose, using that emotional what-if thinking. And that's why, as I said, from emotional intelligence point of view, we should be looking at that strategic emotional intelligence a bit more when we're talking about virtual teams. Just to say to you, by the way, I've used them as skis. The experiential and the strategic are independent of each other. I should probably stress this. I probably should have said it earlier even. So I've seen people who are very good at the experiential, high degrees of empathy, very, very self-aware, but would score low enough on the strategic and don't have, maybe haven't exercised that muscle quite as much, are not as good as thinking through the impact of emotions, okay? And I've also seen the opposite. I've seen people who are very good on the strategic and very good at thinking through logically emotional consequences. In the moment, may not be as good at picking up emotional content and emotional data. Obviously, one can compensate for the other. So people who always say high on the experiential but less on the strategic can put in compensating mechanisms. If you're low on experiential, for example, but high on the strategic, how do you get more data? And that may be as simple as getting someone else who is good at this, saying, what are you picking up in the room today? It can be as simple as that, and I know leaders who do that. They say, I'm not really good at reading a room, but I have someone with me who's really good at this, and get their sense of it, a trusted advisor. So again, just taking those two together. Let's have another discussion. We won't do the breakout rooms, which for some reason has ultimately failed, and I think it's probably because it's on my MacBook today. But have an open discussion. So I'll come back to you. I'm going to open up my screens here again so I can see you all. What emotional intelligence actions could you suggest in the current crisis? Either things that that you can say, these have worked for me already, or even based on our discussion, just a few takeaways that you would like to give in to everyone that's here today and share some EI actions. I'll leave it open forum. Please unmute yourself and jump in, please.
Hi, Billy. Dennis Kelly here. Just
Dennis,
fantastic
you're very
session.
welcome.
Really, really good points. And I suppose for me, the key ones are, which you cover yourself, is checking in. The most important thing is, where is our client, or as a manager, where are my people? That I normally could see, we're missing all these additional cues. The challenge for me as a manager and as a coach is, where is my client? Where am I? How can I relate to them? All the cues that I miss. And I think if we can do that to start any session, I think we get off on the right foot.
Great. Thanks, Dennis. Someone else like to jump in?
Hi, Anya Flanagan here.
Hi, Anya.
Active listening is always important, but I think at the moment in these virtual meetings, active listening becomes exponentially more important.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. I think it's and it takes a skill virtually. I mean, if you've got a lot of people on your screen, that active listening and really reflecting back what you've heard. And really making sure that people feel they have been heard. That was one of the comments earlier in one of the comment boxes that someone added in a message to me on the chat, was that like making sure that people that you've connected with really feel, yes, I have been listened to, because they don't have that emotion, they may not see, they don't see your eyes, they don't pick up that emotional data to say, yes, I know I've been listened to. You really need to spend more time on the active listening. Absolutely, I'd agree with that. Anyone else?
Billy, can I jump in here? Orla Sherlock here.
Orla,
Thank you.
hi.
Hi, thank
Great
you
to see
very
you.
much for this session. Yes, lovely to see you too. Couple of things come to mind for me, and certainly the check-in with people is really important. One thing I think is also important is to check in with yourself. So to suggest for the manager or the leader to check in with themselves beforehand. How are they today? What's happening for them? Because from their perspective, it will be important in how they will respond and react to what goes on in the meeting. And interestingly, I was the one who put in the comment earlier on about how I was feeling, and I said I was exhausted, and somebody had mentioned a lot of Zoom meetings. I've been doing quite a lot of coaching meetings over the last 2.5 weeks and feel quite drained from it. But in terms of meeting people where they are at, and interestingly, when we look at their emotional intelligence reports, the people that have the very high levels in their stress tolerance and in their independence scores seem to be coming across very, very strong, which is fantastic for them as managers and leaders, but to, I suppose, explore with them that not everybody would be experiencing this situation and working from home, and it's managing people remotely, which is new for some people, but it's also managing people remotely during a crisis. And for them to, I suppose, empathy really comes in, to put themselves in the other person's perspective. They may not be coping as well as what you're coping with. So those are my actions, I suppose, and suggestions going forward.
I really like what you said first. They're all about checking in with yourself, and I think those are what we would always. I'd always advocate that anyway for leaders. But I think before you jump on a call with someone is to check, like, where am I here? And again, what I always say with emotional intelligence, like the 3 key questions are: what am I feeling? What has put me in this mood? What is the cause of this? Why I'm feeling? And thirdly, how is this helping me here? Do I need to move this mood or not? Is this really helping me? And I should say as well, when you're working with the team, and some people on this may be feeling exhausted, maybe find this very stressful, is you really need to, when you jump into a meeting, particularly a one-to-one, is to meet the person on their terms. Now, if you need to move them somewhere else emotionally, and you want to get them maybe up into that yellow zone, that may take a little bit of time during your conversation with them. But you can see the mismatch if you're going in fired up on the big yellow zone, all enthusiastic, and big brainstorming, and the person you're meeting is actually having a pretty bad day. They're down in that blue zone. So just think about where you are, where your team might be, and how you can best serve them during that. It's really important. So thank you for that, Orla. So is there...
Hi, I would like to jump in.
Please.
I'm Tawfiq Bamatraf from Saudi, from Kuwait. Thank you so much for hosting this.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, and thanks for everyone who's been sharing. These are very insightful tips. If I would add for the check-in, as a team and as an organization, we started having powerful meetings. That's 30 minutes where everyone checks in. And it's exactly where they check in, where they are now. And they can share just one task they're focused on. So mainly is to connect on human level, where the first 5 minutes where everyone is logging in, it's just chatting. It's like you're walking into the office. And this brings back the vibe of how everyone used to get to when they walk into the office. You get greeted, you get welcomed, and so on. And then we start the check-in. That's where you share, where are you emotionally? And what are your intentions today? And what's one task you're focused on? And it has been helping us so much at this stage.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that, because I think what you've really highlighted there is how can we start to, I suppose, replicate some of the things that we miss in the face-to-face. And I really like the idea of that 30-minute check-in, and even, as you say, putting in that one task and trying to replicate what you might do in a face-to-face. So that is really good. Thank you so much.
100%.
So I think Connie wanted to come in here.
Yes. Hi, Barry. I just wanted to say something about leading teams during this crisis. I think one of the best ways to be able to check in with somebody or a small group is actually to initiate a meditation, or to begin it with just even a couple of minutes of silence, in order to be able to allow people to collect themselves and also to be able to adjust to the new environment that they're operating from. And I suppose with respect to the changes that have occurred within their own life space. And I say that simply because each and every one of us, we continue to make adjustments as we progress through life. So being able to meet people in a way that's fulfilling, I suppose, a purpose of just being able to say, look, I know it takes us all a little bit of time to adjust. Yeah. And that can be done actually through the medium of just a couple of minutes of silence.
And that's, again, trying to get, I think what you're displaying there again is the strategic emotional intelligence, and thinking ahead, what will really help the people here that are on my team. And whether it's that or some other variation of that, in terms of giving that people that space to be silent. I think that can be important as well, because people are used now, as someone was saying, they're jumping in onto all of these Zoom calls, and even being given permission to take that bit of silence. So can I share myself again? Thank you for all of those. I really appreciate it. I just came up with 4 things based on what we've been talking about. So here are 4 suggestions that I would say just to take away. So firstly, actively gather, look for more emotional data. Know that we are being starved of it, and we need to take more, ask more questions, listen more, as Orla said there, and active listening, get more emotional insights. Secondly, think about how you can increase the emotional content of what you are giving to others, and how you can do that. Broaden your emotional vocabulary and practice using it. Thirdly, do more what if scenarios. So thinking ahead, doing that what if, how is this going to work? How will this person react to this? And fourthly, fill the vacuum. Increase the level of transparency even beyond what you might be comfortable doing. It's probably going to serve you quite well to do that. So think of those. Those are just suggestions that I have for you to take away. So just to finish up, some reading, just joking. This is a book written by Xavier de Maistre, A Journey Around My Room. We could probably all write that at the moment. But I wanted to put this side by side with a quote from Marcel Proust, which is, the real voyage of discovery is not in seeking new landscape, but having new eyes. And going back to our warm-up, I really want to encourage you to have those new eyes. We may be all in very familiar surroundings, but I'd like us all to have fresh eyes in how we view the world, how we think about emotional intelligence, how we think about our teams, how we think about our clients, and look for new things that we haven't noticed before. So that's what I just encourage you to do, taking from 2 French authors. Next week, we will have Julia Sullivan. And looking forward to this, developing resilience and agility for our unpredictable world. That's next Wednesday, same time, at 11 a.m. here in Dublin. So thank you for joining me today. Do join us on the LinkedIn page. And we're going to be posting a competition after the session. And that would be, the prize would be a mosquito assessment. So I would invite you to go to join our Dirty Salad LinkedIn group, and we put up the competition there. We will be recording the session, and it will be made available. So thank you for that. So again, thank you very much. I hope you all have a good day, and I'm looking forward to being on the session next week as a participant. Thank you so much for all your contributions, and stay safe, take care of yourself, take care of those around you, and see you next time.